Hey guys, how's it going? It's Logan with Hydra572. Today I'm going to be reviewing the CRKT Crawford Casper Dragon. It's a cool little blade that I picked up around a year ago. I didn't review it right off the bat because it looked as if it was going to be discontinued, but now CRKT is making a couple of different versions. I think they are making just the plain black version and the satin finished version with black scales, but they're also making a black blade and a satin blade with some desert tan scales, so that's pretty cool. The knife has become a little bit more popular again, it looks like, because my unboxing video of this knife got a couple of hundred views, which was pretty cool. So I figured by audience demand that means that I need to do a review. People are probably interested in those new models. So yeah, I figured I should be able to put together a review pretty easily. Having the knife for a year, I've spent some time carrying it and stuff like that. As you see, I've got a retro style handwritten review sheet. We'll go ahead and get started with intended usage, and that is as a concealable fighting knife. CRKT says that this knife has found a market with police officers and soldiers, and I could see that, I suppose, even though I would probably tend to suggest a larger knife. I think the strength of this one is that it is pretty concealable. Whether it's neck carry, I think it's a little bit large for neck carry depending on how you're going to hang it, or doing like a Merc harness, hanging it under your arm, which is what I've been doing lately with this nylon cord, or just putting it in a pocket. I find that it fits in most cargo pockets, so I've carried it like that as well. So I think as a concealable fighting knife it is a really good blade. For EDC, I wouldn't really recommend it, just because the angle of the handle to the blade, your hand will prevent it from getting much blade onto anything that you're cutting. So if you're opening boxes, you're probably going to end up doing most of your cutting like this, cutting with the tip, and with a Wharncliffe design you're already prone to having your tip go dull before the rest of the knife. And I have had a little bit of trouble with that, although it's not really an issue. We'll go ahead and move on to the blade profile. As they talk about in their description, they modeled it after a dragon. They wanted it to be a really natural knife in hand, so that if you weren't very trained with a knife, that you could still use it to defend yourself proficiently, whether that was slashing, stabbing, or smashing with that pommel there. And I think they basically succeeded. I think the Wharncliffe will tip slash pretty well, and I think it will stab great. I think the hollow grind is going to lend quite a bit of penetration to this knife. You have plenty of edge to do quite a bit of damage, even through like a soft body armor layer. I think you're going to get plenty of edge inside the person that you're having to defend yourself from. Slashing, I think it will do great. And while we're on the blade profile, when it came in it had a particularly wide grind, a particularly shallow grind. It was relatively weird. I've reprofiled it since, but just be aware that if you're getting it for more EDC type usage, you might want to reprofile it right off the bat, because that edge is too shallow, I think, to be optimal for that sort of task. Moving on to the pommel, I don't even really know if I want to call that a less lethal or less than lethal capability, because I think if you were to swing this hard like you would if you were distressed, if you were trying to defend yourself, I think that pommel would cause a significant amount of damage if you were to hit in the head. I think it will do its job as a glass breaker, as a compliance device, anything like that. Impacts to other parts of the body will almost certainly be non-lethal, but I think just be wary if you're thinking of using that as less than lethal. I would avoid targeting the head, but you probably know all that, being a police officer or whatever situation you're in. Even a civilian, you'd probably figure that out on your own. Onto the traction, ergonomics, jimping, all that stuff. The scales are nice. They've got pretty wide channels for G10. Or FRN, I don't know which it is off the top of my head. It doesn't really make a difference with this configuration and finish. Not a whole lot of traction coming from these scales. I think any real traction or retention that you're going to get on this knife is due to this deep choil there. The jimping, this is another blade where I really would have liked to see the jimping extend out way onto the back of the knife, so that you could still have jimping when you were gripping the knife in that manner. But overall, the ergonomics are good. It feels good in hand. Presents a couple of sharp edges around the choil, but I don't think that's too much of an issue. The scales came loose, typical CRKT problem, non-Loctited screws or badly Loctited screws, easily enough fixed, just pull the screws out, throw Loctite in there. But you will find when you get the knife, like I did, that you could move the scales around with your fingers, and that's sort of a bummer. The steel is 9CR18. This is the first blade I've had with that steel. It had decent retention through my testing, not really great retention, but then again, with a $25 knife, what are we really asking for? And it was easy enough to sharpen, easy enough to get back to a hair shaving edge. Move on to the sheath. They have a nice sheath kydex, which is what I would prefer to see. I see too many knives that profess to be tactical knives that come with a leather sheath, and I think that's a bummer. And this is a nice kydex. You've got plenty of eyelets for either putting on your clip or running cord through. Plenty of ways to carry the blade. This, they call it their easy clip. You're supposed to be able to put it on wherever you want, even though with this design you only really have two options. You can put it on these 4 holes or on these 4 holes. I have not used this thing hardly at all because it's supposed to allow for horizontal or vertical carry. Vertical carry with this thing installed, the only belt that I could get through the gap between this and the sheath itself is this right here. And all of my other belts were too wide, and this belt fits through these holes easily enough. So if I wanted to carry it in that manner, I would just do it that way and pull the belt through the channels that already exist there. And if I was trying to carry it horizontally on my pocket, I found that it extended at an angle quite a ways off my hip, and that it basically took away the concealability that I liked about this blade. So overall, this is nice, I suppose. It's a nice little attempt, but I found myself using it not at all. Into pricing, we're talking $35 on Blade HQ, $25 on eBay. I think this is a really good choice for a budget tactical blade, a blade that you'd be using to defend yourself. If you were to damage it, it shouldn't hurt you too badly to replace it. And you do get quite a bit of knife for the price and for how concealable it is. As I discussed, it will fit into a pocket, whether that be a jeans pocket, a cargo pocket, anything like that. It is a relatively concealable blade, and I think that's one of its strengths. You get a relatively small handle, but quite a bit of blade there to defend yourself with if need be. I'll launch into the specs really quick. The overall length, 9 1/4, blade length, 4 1/2. Like I said, a relatively large blade for a knife this size. Blade thickness is 0.138, handle length 4, and the weight overall is 4 ounces. The competition, I would say the Cold Steel Spikes and the Boker Besh Wedge are competing in basically the same bracket. Yeah, overall, a well-balanced knife, an easily concealable knife, one that would be very capable in a defensive situation if you needed it to be, and overall a pretty cool and appealing design. Well balanced, lots of blade for the handle length, and pretty good hand fit for me. I have average sized hands, I would say, and it works pretty well for me. I have enjoyed carrying it intermittently throughout this year, and I think if you were to pick one up, you would enjoy it as well, whether you needed to use it or whether you were just adding it to your collection. Hope you guys have enjoyed this review. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more of the same.